I was dead for nearly 2 hours, and in that time, I saw what's coming. And trust me, you need to hear this before it's too late. Tucker Carlson never thought he'd face death, let alone return with a message that would shake him to his core. But after suffering a massive heart attack and being declared dead for nearly 2 hours, he found himself standing before Jesus Christ himself. And what he saw will change everything. Jesus showed him a vision, a warning about what's coming in August 2025. A moment of great purification, a time when the world will be tested and only those with true faith will endure. He saw two paths, one leading to an abundant harvest for those who stand firm, and the other to desolation and regret for those who turn away. Doctors are baffled, his family is shaken, and now he's risking everything to tell the world what he saw, because time is running out. Do you believe in life after death? Do you believe in divine warnings? Let me know in the comments, because after you hear what happened to Tucker, you might start to question everything you thought you knew. And before we begin, most of you watching right now aren't subscribed. If you don't want to miss more powerful, life-changing stories like this, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Let's get into it. Tucker Carlson never imagined his heart would stop beating for nearly 2 hours. A well-known journalist and commentator, he had spent years questioning narratives and searching for truth. But nothing could have prepared him for what was about to happen. On an ordinary afternoon, while at home with his family, he felt a sudden crushing pain in his chest. The world around him faded to black, and within seconds, he was gone. Doctors fought desperately to revive him, but after countless attempts, he was officially declared dead. To the living, Tucker was no more. But for him, the journey was just beginning. The first thing he noticed was the absence of pain. The weight of his body, the tension he had carried for years, gone. He realized he was no longer in the hospital room. A golden light surrounded him, filling him with an indescribable peace. He tried to make sense of what was happening, but before he could even form a question, he felt himself being lifted, as if carried by an invisible force. The silence was absolute, yet it was full, alive with a presence more powerful than anything he had ever encountered. Suddenly, Tucker found himself standing before something vast, a towering gate, not made of metal or stone, but of pure, pulsating light. He instinctively knew this was a threshold between worlds. But what truly left him in awe was not the gate itself, it was the figure walking toward him, clothed in a radiant white robe, exuding a love and authority beyond human comprehension, was Jesus Christ. Tucker could barely lift his eyes to meet his gaze, overwhelmed by the sheer intensity of his presence. Jesus looked at him with infinite tenderness. Without moving his lips, Tucker heard his voice within his soul. "Tucker, your mission is not over." Before he could respond, he was engulfed in a vision, not just an image, but a living, breathing experience. He was being taken to a place of great significance, where a revelation awaited him. And in that moment, Tucker realized his journey was far from over. What he was about to see would change his life forever, and maybe the fate of countless others who would hear his testimony. Tucker barely had time to process what was happening before the scene around him shifted. The luminous gate faded, and he found himself standing in an endless field of golden wheat. The stalks stretched as far as the eye could see, swaying gently in an unseen breeze. The air was warm, filled with a scent he couldn't quite place. Something pure, something divine. The light wasn't coming from the sky, but from everywhere at once, as if the very air carried the radiance of heaven itself. Then he felt it, a presence behind him, strong yet gentle. He turned, and there he was. Jesus Christ stood before him, his robe gleaming brighter than the sun, his eyes like twin flames of love and wisdom. But there was something else. Something beyond human understanding. It wasn't just a man standing before him, It was the source of all truth, all existence. Tucker felt his knees buckle, overcome by the weight of his presence. He couldn't speak, couldn't move. He could only feel. Jesus reached out and touched Tucker's shoulder. Instantly, warmth surged through his being, filling him with a love so intense that it was almost unbearable. It was as if every wound, every doubt, every fear had been erased in a single moment. A peace deeper than anything he had ever known settled into his soul. And then Jesus spoke, not with words, but directly into Tucker's spirit. "You have sought truth, but there is more to see. Let me show you." Without another word, Jesus turned and began walking through the wheat field. Tucker followed, though he didn't feel his feet touching the ground. With every step, the wheat shimmered, as if responding to the presence of its creator. Then suddenly, a gust of wind swept through the field, bending some stalks while others remained upright. Tucker felt a deep knowing within him. This wasn't just a field, this was a message, a vision, something deeply symbolic. Jesus stopped and extended his hand, gesturing toward the endless golden expanse. This is faith. This is perseverance, and this is the test of many. His voice carried an authority that resonated through Tucker's very being. He could feel the weight of what was being revealed to him. This wasn't just about his own journey. This was about everyone, a warning, a prophecy, and it was only the beginning. Tucker stared at the vast wheat field before him, trying to grasp the meaning of what Jesus had just said. The golden stalks swayed gently, but as he looked closer, he noticed something strange. Some of the wheat stood tall and strong, while others were bent, their heads drooping toward the earth. And then, in an instant, a violent wind swept across the field. The weaker stalks snapped, crumbling to the ground, while the stronger ones swayed but remained standing. Jesus turned to Tucker, his gaze both tender and piercing. "This is the test," he said. "Many begin their journey in faith, but only those who endure will see the harvest." Tucker's mind raced. He had spent years questioning everything: politics, media, the forces shaping the world. But he had never questioned this. He had always believed that faith was a personal conviction, something internal. But now, Jesus was showing him something different. Faith wasn't just belief, it was perseverance. It was standing firm when the winds of doubt, fear, and pressure came crashing in. As Tucker watched, he saw figures appear among the wheat. People moving through the field, each facing their own trial. Some struggled against the wind, clinging to their stalks, refusing to let go. Others let the storm overtake them, giving up just before the skies cleared. And then there were those who had abandoned their fields entirely, walking away without ever seeing the harvest that had been meant for them. Jesus extended his hand again, and suddenly, Tucker felt the weight of every soul in that field, their struggles, their fears, their doubts. He saw the exhaustion in the eyes of those who had fought for so long. He saw the bitterness in those who had walked away, and he saw the overwhelming joy of those who had endured, standing in golden fields, ready for harvest. Tucker swallowed hard. "What happens to those who give up?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Jesus' expression didn't change, but there was a deep sorrow in his eyes. They never see what was prepared for them. The word struck Tucker like a blow to the chest. How many people had been on the edge of a breakthrough only to turn back too soon? How many had walked away, never realizing how close they had been? Jesus turned his gaze back to the field. A harvest is coming, but only for those who remain. Tucker knew then that this vision wasn't just for him, it was for everyone. And the most important part of the revelation was yet to come. The golden wheat field began to fade, and suddenly Tucker found himself standing somewhere new. The sky above him churned with dark clouds, flashing with streaks of fire and light. The air felt heavy, charged with an energy he couldn't describe. He turned to Jesus, who stood beside him, his expression solemn. "August 2025, Jesus said, a time of purification." Tucker's heart pounded. He wanted to ask what this meant, but before he could speak, the ground beneath him trembled. He looked out and saw the wheat field once again, but now it was divided. On one side, the wheat stood tall, golden, and full, untouched by the storm raging around it. On the other side, the field was barren. The stalks had withered, their roots torn from the soil. It was as if an invisible force had swept through, separating one from the other. "What is happening?" Tucker asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Jesus extended his hand, and in an instant, Tucker felt the meaning behind the vision. It wasn't about crops, it was about people. A separation was coming, a moment in time where those with true faith would remain standing, while those whose faith was shallow, built on comfort rather than conviction, would be swept away. Not by force, but by their own choices. Scenes flashed before Tucker's eyes, churches struggling, people turning away from their beliefs, chaos erupting in the world. He saw fear gripping those who had once claimed to be strong. He saw others clinging desperately to their faith, refusing to be moved. He saw the battle not just in the world but within hearts, and then he saw something else, a great fire sweeping across the field, not a fire of destruction but of refinement. Those who stood firm in faith were not consumed. Instead, they glowed, their very beings purified in the flames. They were not destroyed, they were strengthened. Tucker turned to Jesus, overwhelmed. "What must they do?" he asked. Jesus' eyes met his. They must decide now. Faith cannot be borrowed, strength cannot be faked. The time of testing will come, and only those who are prepared will endure. The vision burned itself into Tucker's soul. This wasn't just a warning, it was a call for believers to stand firm before it was too late. And as he stared into the swirling storm ahead, he knew this revelation would change everything. Tucker felt his surroundings shift once more. The raging storm faded, and now he stood at a crossroads. Two distinct paths stretched out before him. One bathed in golden light, the other shrouded in darkness. The contrast was stark, yet something deeper pulled at him. He knew these paths represented more than just a choice. They were destinies. Jesus stood beside him, his expression unwavering. "Every soul must choose," he said, gesturing toward the paths. Tucker's heart pounded as he gazed at the first road. It was lined with golden wheat, stretching toward a horizon filled with radiant light. The air around it was peaceful, yet Tucker sensed the struggle it took to walk that road. He saw figures along the way, some moving steadily forward, others stumbling but rising again, their eyes locked on the distant harvest. They had endured the storms, they had remained faithful, and now they were stepping into abundance. Then Tucker turned to the second path. It was barren, lifeless, cracked like scorched earth. The air around it felt heavy, suffocating. Figures walked this road too, but they moved with slumped shoulders, their faces marked by regret. He could feel their sorrow. They had once stood in the wheat field, had once held on to faith, but something had caused them to turn away. Fear, doubt, the weight of the world. Now they wandered aimlessly, realizing too late what they had lost. A deep sadness welled up inside Tucker. "Is there no way back for them?" he asked, his voice trembling. Jesus looked at him, his eyes full of both love and sorrow. "Many will wait until the fire comes, before they realize what they have abandoned. But for some, the call will still be heard. Some will turn back before the final hour. But the longer they wait, the harder the return." Tucker watched as some of the wandering souls suddenly stopped. A few turned back toward the path of light, running with desperation, falling to their knees as they re-entered the golden fields. But others hesitated, and some simply kept walking into the darkness, lost in their regret. A heavy silence filled the air. Tucker clenched his fists, feeling the weight of what he was witnessing. So many are walking away, so many are giving up. Jesus nodded, his voice steady. "That is why you must speak. That is why they must know. The choice is theirs, but the warning must be given. Tucker's breath caught in his throat. He understood now. This vision, this message, it wasn't just for him. It was for everyone. And time was running out. Tucker turned back to Jesus, his mind racing. He had seen the two paths. He had felt the weight of those who endured and those who turned away. And now he understood this wasn't just a vision. This was a commission. Jesus stepped closer, his presence overwhelming yet filled with undeniable love. "You must return," he said. "Tell them what you have seen. Warn them. Strengthen them. Time is shorter than they know." Tucker's chest tightened. He had spent his life uncovering hidden truths, exposing deceptions, and questioning the world around him. But this was something entirely different. This wasn't just about politics, culture, or power struggles. This was about eternity. He swallowed hard. "How will they believe me?" he asked. "The world is filled with noise. People only hear what they want to hear." Jesus' expression didn't change. "Speak the truth. Those who seek will listen. Those who doubt will remember when the time comes. Your mission is not to convince, only to proclaim." At that moment, Tucker saw something astonishing. Ripples of light extended from where he stood, spreading outward like waves over an unseen ocean. Every word, every testimony, every moment of truth had a reach far beyond what he could comprehend. Some would reject it, some would mock it, but many others would wake up. Jesus placed a hand over Tucker's heart, and an indescribable warmth flooded his entire being. It was as if strength, purpose, and understanding had been poured into him in a single instant. "Go," Jesus said, "and do not be silent." The words rang in Tucker's soul. He knew now that this message wasn't just about the future, it was about right now. He had to return. He had to speak. The world needed to hear this warning before it was too late. And just like that, the vision began to fade. The golden light around Tucker began to dim, and for the first time since his heart had stopped, he felt the weight of his body again. A force pulled him backward, as if he were being yanked from eternity itself. Then, pain. A crushing, unbearable pain in his chest. He gasped, his lungs burning as if he had been underwater for hours. His eyes shot open, and suddenly he was back. The hospital room was in chaos. Nurses scrambled, monitors blared, and doctors stood frozen in shock. One of them, a middle-aged man with tired eyes, had been preparing to sign the final paperwork declaring Tucker deceased. Instead, he was now staring at a man who, by every medical standard, should not be alive. Tucker's body trembled as his mind fought to reconcile what had just happened. One moment, he had stood in the presence of Jesus, given a mission of eternal significance. The next, he was gasping for air, surrounded by stunned faces. He could hear the frantic whispers of medical staff. "This is impossible. We called it. He was gone for almost 2 hours. His vitals, they're normal." A nurse rushed to his bedside, her hands shaking as she checked his pulse. Her eyes widened. "Doctor, he's not just alive. His heart, it's perfect. No damage, no sign of arrest." The doctor's face paled. That made no sense. Tucker had suffered a massive cardiac arrest. His body had been lifeless for hours. Even if he had somehow revived, he should have suffered massive brain damage. Yet he was staring at them, fully alert. Tucker took a slow, unsteady breath. His mind wasn't on the medical miracle unfolding around him. He didn't need science to explain what had just happened. He had been sent back. His mission had begun. Ignoring the wires still attached to his arms, he forced himself upright. The nurses protested, but he barely heard them. He looked at the doctor, at every person in the room. His voice was hoarse but steady. "I have something to tell you." News of Tucker's miraculous return spread quickly, but no one was more shaken than his own family, especially his son, Jack. A lifelong skeptic, Jack had spent years dismissing discussions of faith, the afterlife, or anything beyond what could be proven. To him, his father's career had been built on questioning narratives, exposing falsehoods, and tearing down illusions. But now Tucker was claiming he had seen Jesus Christ himself. Jack sat in silence as his father recounted every detail of the experience: the golden wheat field, the two paths, the warning about August 2025. The weight of his father's words pressed against his chest, but his mind fought back. It couldn't be real. People didn't just come back from the dead, and even if they did, why would his father, of all people, receive such a message? "Dad, you were clinically dead for almost 2 hours," Jack finally said. "Maybe it was just a hallucination, oxygen deprivation, a dream." Tucker didn't flinch. He had expected this reaction. He simply leaned forward, locking eyes with his son. "Jack, I have spent my life uncovering deception. You know that. Do I look like a man who is lying to you?" Jack hesitated. His father's gaze was steady, unshaken, not desperate, not delusional, just certain. Days passed, but Jack couldn't shake the conversation. He found himself researching near-death experiences, reading accounts that mirrored his father's. He watched the way people responded to Tucker's testimony, strangers breaking down in tears, hardened skeptics rethinking their beliefs. Something was happening, something real. Then came the dreams. Jack woke night after night, heart racing. The image of the two paths burned into his mind. He had never seen them before, never heard of them, except in his father's story. But now, they haunted him. And deep down, for the first time in his life, he felt it. The weight of choice, the weight of truth. And he wasn't the only one. Across the country, Tucker's message spread. Some mocked it, some dismissed it, but many, because something inside them whispered that time was running out. So now you know what Tucker Carlson saw beyond the veil of death: a warning, a choice, a moment in time that will separate the faithful from the lost. August 2025 is coming. Will you be ready? What do you think about this vision? Do you believe this was a true message from Jesus? Or do you have your doubts? Drop a comment below. I want to hear your thoughts. And if this story made you think, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. There's more coming. Stories that will challenge, inspire, and reveal truths you've never considered. Until next time, stay strong, stay watchful, and never stop seeking the truth.